without further ado, let's go into how to land a product role. Just for those who don't know me, about me, I'm Miguel. I'm the driver at Wagon Singapore. I take care of operations over here. Before that, I was working as an Agile product consultant in Singapore. Before that, I was product owner, product manager for a number of small services when I was freelancing. And before that, I was working in talent management and assessment and development, where I assessed a number of big roles in product, from chief product officers to chief product managers to small product management roles. So I bring some practices and experiences from having done it professionally on the selection side, from having worked for small companies, from having worked for big companies, from having been on the agency side. So I hope that you find the current talk insightful and that helps you. Just one thing, it's a little bit opinionated, like it's a little bit constrained by my own experience. So I'm more than welcome to questions, more than welcome to challenge, more than open to debate. So let's go. For some reason, my clicker is not working right on, but basically what I would like to achieve at the end of the talk for those guys from Wagon over here is try to give you some actionable advice and resources if you're seeking a product role, whatever that means today. And hopefully you can reflect on that advice, you can reflect on those resources, you can get back to me later on and say, look, Miguel, I would like to work on this. I think I'm going to follow up from all the things that you said. I found this really interesting. And if you want to pair with me or I could support you in any capacity, I'm very, very happy to do it. So that on what I would like to accomplish. What I'm going to try cover today is talk a little bit about what is a product role, what is not, how product roles have evolved over the last 6-7 years. How does the typical product hiring process look like? What are the things that you should expect when you go into the search for a product role? And what does it mean to get noticed? So how can you actually do it? And how can you actually go about showcasing skills once you're in the interview process? So that being said, let's go right on. And let's talk briefly about product roles. And how many product roles have you seen? How many product titles have you seen that have the word product in it? Throw it in the chat and tell me what are some of the things that you've seen. If you've already been looking for a product role, if you've been on LinkedIn, what are some of the things that you've seen? Manager, product owner, product lead, product marketing, product manager, product specialist, product owner, product manager, product designer, very good, product engineer. And do we have an idea, guys, of what is the difference between these roles, roughly? Like, what is the difference between a product owner and a product manager? What is the difference between a product manager and a product designer? Probably that they don't come to mind immediately, and that's fine, because these are all roles that are amorphous by design. And Malin has a perfect point over there. It seems that different companies interpret them very differently. Absolutely. Like, depending on the size of the company, the maturity of the company, their product philosophy, how they approach product development in general, the role can be very, very different. And that's something that you need to keep in mind. Like, when there's generalities, there are things that are more or less the same for everybody, but many things could be very different, and it depends on your expectations and everything. Your first steps into the interview might blow you off even. You might see like, hey, I don't want to sign up for this. And that's because there's so much variability, and the role of product has exploded so much over the last 10 years that there's too much entropy in the role. I think there's no role that is perfectly defined, but maybe things like being a Rails developer, if you're coming from Wagon, that makes much more sense to you and can be much more scoped. There's a certain level of tools, a certain level of tasks that you can expect to be doing. What product management is like, what is it really? So some of the roles that you can see over there, you can see a product manager, you can see a product strategist, you can see a product owner, you can see technical product manager, you can see a product designer, a product business analyst, a product marketing manager, or God knows what, right? Or product CRO, which is a product conversion optimization, right? It's a conversion rate optimization. So all these roles are floating around, and they all have different dimensions that pull them more either towards the technical side or the UX side, or it pushes them more to the commercial side on the marketing, on marketing. Or you have product owner, which is a title that kind of falls down more from the agile terminology of how you should structure a team, but overlaps a bit with what a product manager should be doing. Agencies tend to prefer product strategists because that you work from clients and you'd like bring in the strategy from the outside. If you're working with APIs where you're working solely with technical teams and there's no UX involved, there's very little pieces of UX involved, and maybe you tend to call it a technical product manager. In the product designer, it's probably what a UX designer was 5-6 years ago, and now it's being repackaged into this idea of product. So the role is kind of elevated and it's more connected to the business and the strategy, but still very much on the design part. So you can see that it's more like an amorphous construct that ebbs and flows. So what everybody kind of says around product people is that it goes around 3 key constructs, no matter what the role is. And one is technology. It's a person that brings some solid foundations in tech and knows basics of infrastructure, databases, software development. And maybe he's not a developer himself or herself, but it's somebody who knows enough to speak the language of technology. It's somebody who understands user and it's obsessed on solving user problems. And sorry, Rachel, I think the typing is coming through the mic. I'm so sorry. Sorry, I have a colleague over here and he has a really good keyboard, but it just comes through the mic. So as I was saying, user experience is another key pillar of the role. And basically your role as a product manager is solving questions and solving problems and making decisions so you can make user happy. But unlike user experience, people who are mostly advocating the user, the product manager also needs to advocate the business and make sure that the product is capturing value for an organization and you're making money out of it, right? So you bring in these 3 things and you're supposed to be somewhere in the middle. Now, this is the theory. This is how it was defined maybe 10 years ago, very famously, and a lot of people start talking about product management like this. And what I don't like about this definition is that it almost exposes you as a technician. It exposes you as somebody who uses a lot of tools all the time, which to a certain extent is true, but it doesn't expose what are really, really crucial skills of the day-to-day of product people. Because at the end of the day, it's a soft role. And what nobody tells you is that your role is to solve conflicts, talk to people, making teams work, making sure that there's clarity about what needs to be done, making sure that you keep people happy. Because if, let's say that you're a product manager in a business, in a B2B environment, your customers are also lots of different stakeholders that you need to keep happy with regards to which features are going to come in first and next, not only external, but also internal, because you have people from sales who are letting you know that they need this particular feature so they can close the deal. You have people from customer success highlighting lots of pains from customers, letting you know that you have this particular feature that you need to solve. So you have all these inputs. You have an engineering team on one side, you have designers on the other, and you need to aggregate all this input to make sense of everybody, right? And at the end, that boils down to soft skills. It boils down to being able to make organizations work, being very good at organizational effectiveness and being very good at navigating organizations, and being very good at leadership, being very good at creating clarity, setting direction, and setting vision. And that is something that no matter how many courses you do on how to do agile roadmaps, how many courses you do on creating user stories, you need that interpersonal feel to see how you come across, what is the impact that you have, and how other people experience you when you're trying to explain a feature to other people. So that's my opinionated way of things that matter in the role, and things that also matter quite a bit and don't tend to be so pronounced when you look at literature or when you look at blogs around there. Does that make sense for everybody? Any questions? Just letting it sink a bit to see if there's any questions coming up. Okay, so I guess this is all making sense. Some things to watch out for, by the way, if you're engaging in interviews and you're smelling certain things about the role and you're not sure whether that's something that should be or not. Definitely a product manager or product guy, product girl, product folk, note taking is a big part of your role. Like whenever you're in a user test, whenever you're talking to your engineering team, whenever you're talking to stakeholders, keeping track of context and making sure that you record everything, it's important, but it's not everything. And some program managers or some roles that are somehow connected to product end up being glorified secretaries, and they're just taking notes. And they don't have any inputs to strategy. They're not making decisions. They don't own anything. The only thing that they're doing is aggregating information. And if you only do that, then your product career is not going to be great, because you're limited to just aggregating input, but you're not owning outcomes, and you're not also deciding on what outcomes are actually going to be happening. So that's an important one. And linked to that is an order taker. So if you're just listening to stakeholders and the stakeholders are giving you requirements and you cannot decide what requirement is going to get done first, what feature is going to get done first, what happens later, measure what makes user happy, what not, and give that feedback back to stakeholders, and you're just being told what to implement, and you just like breaking it down for the developers and the designers to get it done. That's not an ideal. It shouldn't be also full-time project management. You should get exposure to customers, you should get exposure to users for sure. And some people just repackage the project management role into, and they just put product on top of it, but it's not product. You're just giving tasks, and you need to make sure that those tasks get done. And a difficult one is noticing if you're in a feature factory, which means that you are just aggregating features, and maybe you're doing a lot of the things. You're doing 80% of what the product manager job should be doing, but you're not measuring, and you're not deciding, and you don't have any ownership on strategy. You're just getting new features, you're getting them implemented, and it's just stacking them up in front of one another, but you're not really driving the future of the product. So those things are like anti-patterns that happens in a lot of organizations. So be sure that you ask good questions, subtle questions when you're in the interview process, and you can realize what is going on. That being said, how does the hiring process look like? What is the overview of it? So you have a sourcing phase, like in any other role, where recruiters and product managers and product people are going to be out there trying to advertise roles, trying to get in touch with great people that can satisfy the need that they have. You have a place where it's a profile screening, and you're just going to look at your CV, look at your LinkedIn, look at your resume, look at your portfolio. If they like you and you apply, they'll call you for an interview. 1 to N, you might have one interview, you might have 3-4 interviews, and you might be interviewed by first a product guy, and then, or first HR, and then a product person, and then the chief product officer, and then you're going to have another interview with the designer, and then another interview with an engineer. After that, it's very likely that you do 1 to N case studies, and if everything goes well over there, there might be a final step where we talk about cultural fit, which is, well, do they like you? Do they feel the culture? Do they feel that you have the same values that the team has, and people feel comfortable with you? So what to do in each of these phases, right? On the first two, get noticed, and make sure that you show credibility and passion, and that you're out there and you're discoverable. And why is this so important in product? Like, as I was saying before, it's a role that is really shaped by your ability to influence people. And in many organizations, in good ones, product managers don't really have authority over people. I cannot tell an engineer what to do. I can reason about what makes sense to do. And I need to get his buy-in into almost every decision that I want to do. So as it's something that it's definitely very interpersonal. It's not like imagine the hottest role right now or the hottest set of skills, and you apply to a company and people are going to call you. You need to make sure that you get face time with people, that you get a very good sales pitch in, so you augment your abilities of being hired. Like if I'm a data engineer today, and I can demonstrate that I'm an excellent data engineer and have all these products in all this amazing portfolio in my back, then there's not much more to demonstrate. Like people can see I have done the job, but in product management, like in consulting, like in anything else that it's indirect, where you're exerting influence over people, it's not that obvious, and you need to put yourself out there for sure. On the interviews and the case studies, you need to show skills and ability, but in the moment. And like other processes in other positions, like in UX or also in development, where you might get a take-away home assignment, and they might tell you, well, even after an interview, after a live coding interview, might say like, oh, look, take this feature and bring it back, and you have a week to implement it, or 2 weeks. Or in UX, like, take this thing and try to design it and bring me a wireframe, bring me a screen, bring me a high fidelity prototype, whatever, after X time. At least in my experience, what I've seen so far, most case studies are something that happens in an office or happens face to face, and in the moment they give you an hour or two, and you need to be really fast and on top of your feet to pass it. And then we have the cultural fit, which is more around not being a weirdo and making sure that you come across well and people realize that you're somebody who's collaborative and easy to work with. Right? So we're going to be covering what to do to get noticed, what to do to showcase skills, and don't be a weirdo. I leave it to your best selves. So does that make sense? Before we go into how to get noticed, advice on this? A couple of things on the chat popping up. See if I can. Perfect sense. Yes, all good, all good. Steve is all good. All right. Let's go, people. From here, it gets heavy. Like now from here, it's going to be me giving unsolicited advice and sharing lots of resources that I hope helps you. So again, getting noticed, your profile needs to be visible to the community of product people, to the community of recruiters. What to do about that? Participate in as many meetups and events as you can. Put yourself out there. Not only to go there and network and see cool presentations, but to actually participate, to be in a leading role, speak or do workshops or anything like that. Make sure you block consistently and distribute it to good places where recruiters might be or where product people might be. And there's always something new. There's always something that can be blocked about. There's always something that helps somebody else. And you need to compare two candidates and that are kind of similar, they're both junior level, or they're both like, seems like a good junior PM kind of thing, and one blocks and the other doesn't, it's kind of clear. Like that you can see who's going to be, who at perception, the face of the cost of perception, who is more passionate, who is more motivated. So this has an amazing impact, and every article that you write that is quality is adding to your portfolio as well. So that is absolutely recommended. Make sure that you build stuff and that you ship it and that you articulate your decisions and why you chose certain features and how did you prioritize stuff and what kind of artifacts did you create, especially also if you work with other people, if you work with other developers. A good thing as well could be finding a mentor and looking into product management communities. There's lots of people who could be interested. And clean your CV of LinkedIn for sure. Like if you are a product manager, the undertone is that you have some taste for product design. You're not a product designer, but you want to use products that are usable, that are accessible, that look clean. So your CV needs to send that undertone, and your LinkedIn as well. So starting into meetup events. When I first started going to meetup events, I felt a little bit like that, like just going to meetup events and I don't know anything about the product life and I don't know anything about the tech life and how do I actually go about this, and how I felt very nervous. That is actually a mental block, and every time you go to a meetup event and you don't connect with anybody or you don't do anything yourself, it's time that you've lost. Like nobody remembered you, you didn't grow your network, you didn't do anything for yourself. So participating is the key word. 100%. Like try to do lightning talks for any product, unless it's a huge product event where they're bringing really top people, but for any regular meetup where it's just run by a small community, they're always looking for speakers. and you can put those talks as part of your talks. So you can do a lightning talk, or you can run a workshop about product design. You can run a workshop about how to do an inception, how to do a product sprint, a product design sprint. That kind of stuff can help you get more comfortable in your skin of a product manager. And you can showcase your skills in front of other people who are in the business. And if for whatever reason you don't do a good job, you can get feedback from them live, right? And you can improve. So that's fantastic. A little tip that I always try to do, because I'm not a natural extrovert, is to make sure that I have a good combo opener for any random person that I might have next to me, right? Like if I'm just picking a sandwich or a drink next to somebody and we just have casual conversation, have at least 1-2 questions that are insightful, that help me discover more about that person. If you're in Singapore, how to do this? A few resources that we're going to check out. Product Hunt Singapore, it's here, which is a really good community. So Product Hunt is today probably the biggest platform for products, where everything that is new and everything that gets shipped new, it's shared over here. And they're in Singapore. So you can go to a meetup. There's lots and lots and lots of great product people from Singapore on the scene over here that you can connect with and learn. They're always looking for speakers, sometimes more mature, sometimes younger. So if you go there and say like, hey, I prepared this talk and I would really love to share it at Product Hunt, I would be very surprised that they say no, that they completely brush you off. Like probably they would say, at the worst scenario is probably not now, but what about next month? What about in 2 months? And that's amazing, right? And you're being featured with Product Hunt, which is giving you a lot of credibility immediately. Another place that I really like here in Singapore, it's Agile Dojo. And these guys, an Agile Dojo takes the same idea of a kata in programming, but bringing it to the world of collaboration. So these guys are very much into agile product management and agile organizations. So they run sessions where they practice product management skills live, and they get feedback. And they do something like, I don't know, we're going to get this email product, and we're going to create the first release, and we're going to write all the features for that first release, right? And they go into different groups. Everybody does work. They put it together, and everybody shares feedback, and they practice something difficult. And it's an amazing way of connecting with people who might be seeking roles in product management, and they can see you collaborate. They can see you do work live. They can see you interact with them live. They can see you come across live and see if you could be a good fit for their company or not. So definitely keep it in mind. And this guy, John Duquesne, is an amazing product manager and a really good person. So absolutely recommend it. And you have Product Talks Singapore as well. Which is another big community when you can just apply, join, taste it, and they're also very active. So if you have something to share or you want to talk, just be part of it. Those recommendations if you're in Singapore for sure. Also, I have over here Wagon Singapore. Like, we're not strictly a product meetup, but we talk about product design and coding. If you are listening and you say like, hey, I want to prepare something and I want to get coached by Miguel and Prima on a talk, and I want to expose it at Wagon so I can just also put it in my portfolio or get some practice, you are welcome. Whether you're here in Singapore, whether you're remote, you can do it. Just let us know and we can make it happen, okay? So that on Meetup Events. Did that make sense, people? Any questions? Jonathan, should you be coming ready with a portfolio at an entry level? Jonathan, you're a recruiter, so you tell me, how how does that feel to you? If you're a recruiter and you're looking for somebody, whether it's in tech or you're in product, would you value somebody with a portfolio or not?
I recruit on a C level though, so it's very
Okay. So
unlikely
it's
you
important
as a
people.
portfolio. Yeah.
That's the big fish. I would say yes, 100%. Like even if it's very little, if you have something to show for, if you can demonstrate your passion, it's already differentiating you so much from somebody who's just putting their CV over there. It's so good.
Mm. Mm.
So yeah, that on Meetup Events. If the next thing that I would highly recommend is blogging. Like it's writing is still one of the most effective ways to build your brand. And if you have good articles, people keep coming back at them. They're self-discovery. People keep clapping. You accumulate likes, the claps. You become visible to recruiters, and eventually people just contact you and it's like, can you tell me more about this? Or I really like your article on this, and you just create a connection. And when you can put it in your CV or on your LinkedIn profile, it demonstrates a lot of passion and motivation and love for what you want, right? For the role that you want. So I think it's an excellent choice. I wanted to showcase this link. So this is the blog of somebody who's done the bootcamp with us, Jonathan, and this is from Maria. So yeah, so she's a recent graduate, and she had a little bit of a problem at the end of the bootcamp, so she had to leave back to Cyprus. But she is a product manager, or at least before she left, for sure, she was a product manager at Grab, and she didn't come from product management at all. She came from the aeronautical industry, and she built this amazing blog with lots of tips on how to break into product, lots of things about recommendations on how to manage products, of lessons that she's learned, or it's principles that she's distilled by herself, and it just makes her so credible. Like the content in the blog is really, really good. It's well written. It's clearly expressed, so you can, if you're a recruiter or if you're a product person, you can see like, wow, this person thinks very clearly, communicates very clearly, which is super important for a PM. If you want 10% top communicators. So yeah, absolutely recommend it. I just wanted to leave it as an example of something that is down to earth and it's achievable. Like I could pull the blog of some crazy product persons, like you need to write stuff like this when you are the VP of Netflix, the VP of product of Netflix, but that doesn't help, right? Like if you see the example of a graduate and then somebody within the community that you can tap on, and you can reach out to Maria and say like, hey, how did you come up with these ideas? How did you go about writing this? How often do you write? What's your motivation? How do you find all that? It can be really fruitful. If if you don't know what to blog about, because it's like I don't know, like I don't know nothing. I don't feel comfortable blogging about anything, which is normal. There's so much that you can blog about. There's so much that you can blog about. Like you can cover a new product that has been launched. So if there's a famous thing being launched by Google, you can write an article about your experience with it and why do you think Google did it and what was the value on the tech side, what was the value on the UX side, what was the value on the business side. You can cover a new trend in the tech world or in the product world. You can talk about things that you've built at Levagon, or talk about your pet projects, and you can talk about what was your thought process, what was the product pitch, how did you broke it down into features, how did you go about prioritizing, what were your thoughts about launching, how do you go about testing the product, and what kind of feedback did you get. There's new frameworks, tools, and canvases being created constantly. So I don't know, something that we used to love at our previous agency was a tool called impact mapping. And why use impact mapping? And it's just a tool that helps you think through, well, this is really not very visual. Maybe this is better. Yeah, this is a better image. So it's basically a tool that helps you think through goals and what are the people in related to your product that are going to be attached to those goals and what are the impact that you want to have on those actors. And at the end of all of it, you start thinking about features, right? So we really loved it at our agency. We liked it a lot. We always asked when we were recruiting senior product people with experience about impact mapping. Do they know it? Have they used it? Nobody knew it. And people with, I don't, maybe 10 years of experience in product management, they didn't know this tool. It was important for us. So if you do a blog about impact mapping, just to put an example, or any new way of road mapping, or any new tool that is out there and people are starting to get curious about, it's very likely that you help somebody and you help somebody discover something that could add value to their professional careers. And it helps you showcase your own branding as a product manager, as somebody who's in the wave of the latest things, right? So that's a kind of an easy one, just covering how to use a tool, and it looks good on your portfolio if you write it well. And I think this is interesting. And when you look at product blogs, when you look at the blogs of really experienced product people, they talk all the time about organizational matters, about organizational topics, how to create high-performing teams, how to give feedback, how to say no, how to deal with the internal fears of product management. Like, it's all about the interpersonal and the organizational, which is, like, you wouldn't think intuitively that product management is around that, but definitely. If we just go over here to Product Coalition, and there you go. Like, the first thing that you get is 18 signs of a systemic toxic team culture. Let's see if there's anything else. Setting up a home office. There you go. Prioritization. So lipstick agile. So this is also about organizations in general. So yeah, guys, that's another way that you could just talk about what was my experience working in 1 week sprints, or what was my experience working with a team remotely. And that showcases that you actually had experience and that you know how to do things and how to operate in a real environment. So all those are my little suggestions on writing blogs. Any questions on that? Now, how do you pitch yourself if you have project management experience, but have no product management experience, but are keen to switch to product management role? Now, I don't know what kind of project management experience you have. Like, if you come from an IT background and you're a Scrum Master, or you've been doing business analysis more on the functional side, trying to get people together and understand requirements, I think that pitching yourself moving into product, it's a relatively easy pitch, right? Like, if you just probably have the skills and you have accumulated a lot of experience in managing people and all the organizational and all the conflict management that happens in projects, and maybe you've gone more into usability and you've earned a degree or two, or you've learned more about technology, and that justifies your jump and your pitch, and you can differentiate yourself as knowing the underpinnings of how the people factor and how the project management factor works at product management, and you can learn the rest. But if you come from a project management background in, let's say, in chair manufacturing, right, you have a bigger threshold to cross, right? So how do you justify that you're a good fit? How do you justify your knowledge? How do you justify your skills, your abilities? And at the very beginning, it's going to be your portfolio or your previous work what is going to talk for it. So my opinionated recommendation, like if anybody doesn't agree with me, I'm all out for the debate. I think that if you come from a background that has nothing to do with either product, tech, or UX, sorry, business, UX, or tech in the tech world in general, maybe you should build a little bit of that before pitching yourself in a way that comes across as credible. Like again, all that I'm mentioning, I guess it rotates around the idea of credibility and being perceived as somebody who's solid and knows and is motivated. And even if you are, you need to demonstrate it to people who have very little information and very little attention span to evaluate it. So what the input that you give to them at the very beginning needs to be very powerful. More on that, by the way, something that I wanted to add on this page is Product Coalition, 10 Medium, and Medium PM Insider. All these are aggregators. They don't really have a team of editors or a team of writers. This is all crowdsourced. So there's just users of Medium who write, go to the publication and say, hey, I've wrote this thing about product management. Can I publish it with you? And since the role is to aggregate content, most of the times they will say yes if the article is good quality. Like it's like Netflix right now. Like the joke goes like everybody can just put a series on Netflix because their business model is about aggregating content, so more people can join. So this works in more or less the same way, that you can go to Product Coalition, and I'm very sure they will have something about writing with us, contribute with us. There you go, publish. Product Coalition membership and whatnot, but I'm interested in writing with us. Start here podcast. Maybe I can go here to Product Coalition in this place. For some reason I cannot see it now, maybe in about. But again, in most of these publications, you can just apply and put an article. And a big one is the Startup, for instance. And these guys are the biggest publication on Medium. And you can always, like, there you go, writers here. And they cover all things technology, companies in startups and tech. And you can submit a story, it gets featured, and you can say that your product story has been covered in the biggest publication of Medium, which it's not a difficult goal, but it looks really good in your portfolio. So stuff like this can really, really help. That being said, people, I'm gonna go fetch a glass of water. So I'm talking a lot and I'm not getting any questions from anybody. So I'm gonna be back at 7:20, just put some water down my throat, and I'll be right back with the next step. Now, if I want to, let's say, start the bike, right? You want to move the bike from one point to another point. Then we can have a method. So if properties are instance variables, right? Behaviors are instance methods. Properties, instance variables, method, instance. Behaviors, instance methods. Okay. You're always going to hear the word instance a lot, which means it's the byte, B1, not all byte, but B1 byte, and B2 byte. Okay. Let's say I want to accelerate. All right, let's go back at it again. So I'm getting an interesting question. It is, if you're a technical lead and you're working in product development, maybe you're overseeing a team of engineers, and what shift in mindset we need to invent as a technical lead to embed to land the job as a product manager. And I think that's a really interesting one, because I've met technical leads that could probably jump into a product role very quickly, because they have the right mindset. Like they really care about users, they really care about the business, they really care about prioritization, they want to be in business discussions, and they want to participate in things that really add value. And I've met technical leads as well that are the stereotype of a technical lead or a technical person, who are very much about the features, and they are very excited about the difficult things to implement and the difficult technical problems, regardless of whether that solves a problem or not, or whether that is something that adds value to the business or not. So I think the shift in mindset is something very personal, right? Like, what is your priority? What are things that you like? What are things that excite you? In terms of the portfolio, I think that what you added on the question makes a lot of sense. Like, if you can reason about how do you strategize a product, how do you went about understanding customers, how do you went about getting feedback and implementing it very quickly, how do you go about understanding maybe patterns in products, and how is that maybe changing the collective psyche and mind space of people, right? When if everybody, for instance, is now using a particular set of features, and how is that transforming the way products are being built? It's definitely a very good point. I think that as a technical lead in product development, probably I wouldn't call myself an expert in talent management for technical leads, but probably if you jump into a technical product management role, that would be a quicker fix for you, because you can probably empathize much faster with the life of developers, and what it means for them to consume other services or to consume other APIs. So that's my answer on that side. And Michelle Go is asking me, or asking us, any advice for someone moving from a fast-moving consumer goods brand manager role to being a product manager in a tech company? Well, Michelle, if you were brand manager role, guess that you probably know a lot already about the business, and you know a lot about how to run a business that is not digital or technical, and that's probably your strength. If you can learn enough about UX and you can learn enough about technology, maybe there's an opportunity for you. And Sarath is asking, don't you think technical leads think about solution or implementation of a problem? whereas product tries to understand more about the problem. I'm not sure about that, and probably depends on the organization and the size of it. I think that, and depends on the phase of the product as well. Like if you're at the beginning of the product and you're much more focused on discovery, then definitely product people are going to be much more focused on understanding users. But you could also have product people that are very close to implementation and actually designing solutions themselves, especially if the UX team is small, or there's no UX team, which could happen in a startup where you're the product person, and the product person needs to compensate for all the things that engineers, I don't say cannot do, but they cannot do because they need to write code. So I don't think it's a amorphous role. I don't think there's a black and white answer to that. And Jonathan is asking me, how did you go about getting freelance work in product? And what do other companies usually look for help on the product side of a freelance phases? So Jonathan, my answer to that, so my background is HR, and my connections were in HR. So once I learned how to code and once I learned a bit more about product management, I could approach my network. I could understand their problems really well. I could resonate with their users really well and say like, look, I can build a product for you and I can manage it and I can get a team of developers around me and try to build solutions that add value to your company, especially in my field, which was a lot of traditional consulting companies that are either led by people who are business people or people who are in psychology, but they don't understand the tech side at all. So I could add that value. I had the relationship with them, and that bought me the buy-in and the confidence to go and do technical work for them. Right? So that's how I went about it. I think that the network there, in my case, made a tremendous difference as a freelancer, and that from there, then I could build a little bit of credibility, talk to other people, and I could get gigs outside of HR. But that was mostly it. Yeah, that was my story. If anybody else wants to share their story, if there's any freelance product manager in listening to me, please go forward. Good. So, by the way, let me see. Just a very good blog post came to mind. Let me see. I think it's portfolio, how to create it. Hey, this one. Just checking it at the beginning of the day. So this is a very good article on how to build your portfolio as a product manager when you're not one. And Sarath, it goes very much around the lines of what you're saying about how can you demonstrate that you've strategized something, or that you've gone into the problem of something, or that you've documented difficult decisions about prioritizing features beyond building something, or you went around about understanding a problem. So I'm just going to post that over there. Post it maybe to everyone, not just to Sarah. Could be helpful for everybody. There we go. So next step, finding a mentor. We're living in these crazy times of tribes and communities that allow for things to happen that were not possible just 10 years ago. So there's a lot to junior to mid-level professionals that want to skill up. They want to go into a leadership role. They want to jump from product manager to senior product manager to product manager, super boss, VP, chief product officer, you name it, doesn't matter. The thing is that they want to seek that leadership experience, and they want to seek that demonstrated interest in mentoring and leading others, right? So there's a surprising big amount of people who are seeking mentorships, but not as mentees, but as mentors themselves. And you can track down these people and say, hey, can you be my mentor? Because you have a lot of experience in product management. You're looking for these mentorships, or maybe you just want to give back to the community. I need to grow. You have connections. I can try to build my portfolio with you. You can give me feedback. You can give give exposure to my portfolio. So how's that not a win-win? And places where you can look for amazing mentors are this first website. It's called Amazing Design People List, which is a directory of people who are in design and are mostly looking for mentorships, but as mentors, again, not mentees, but mentors. They want to be mentors, and you can apply to be their mentees. And there's lots of people in UX or lots of people in designers, but in design. But if you go through it, if you go through the list, you'll also find lots of people in product or people who are strategic designers and can also help. So, or if you want to get better at UX and you want to get better at understanding users only, it's an amazing resource. I think it's really, really cool. And you can also go to the local communities in Meetup where there's people in Product Tank or Mind the Product. You can join some of the biggest communities in product management and just talk to people. And maybe you find somebody who is passionate about something that you want to do and something that you want to build, and that person will help you, or you will find somebody with the right domain expertise. So 100% go, join, connect with people, and you can find something that really, really helps you in the future. Like just as a personal story, I remember I went to one Product Tank Singapore talk, and I had this idea, like because of this talent management work, I had some background in coaching, and I want to create this canvas that was a mixture of design thinking and coaching. And this person was really into creating templates. So he gave me amazing feedback and was really willing to help me just because he liked my idea, and he got lit up about it. So we just connected in the moment, and that person helped me a lot in the future. And later on, he offered me like, hey, do you want to come work over here? And I was already engaged in something else, but those connections can happen just by having a conversation and just sharing your passion with somebody else. So even, I know it's difficult, it's very difficult to get out of your skin and do this kind of thing, but it can really make a difference. So yeah, ship stuff. That is, at the end of the day, the thing that will buy you the most credibility. Do you have actual products that work? And have you documented your thought processes around those products and why you did the things that you did? That is probably what's going to give you the most credibility. So if you're a Levagoner, if you come from Levagon, get your hands dirty. Even if, I know that maybe you just want to do product management, but do Rails new, start building something, get a team around you, get a couple of developers who are excited about your project, and be the product person for them and put that under your belt. Build small projects with no-code tools. Like there's lots of them that can help you validate different ideas, different hypotheses, and discover the problem space of something that you're exploring. So if you go to places like Bubble.io, these are platforms where you can create applications without necessarily knowing how to code. You can move way faster. And if you just want to create quick prototypes and you just want to validate something, or put a prototype that is functional in front of somebody, in front of customers, and get that feedback, it can be a really good solution. Alvin, who's listening, I know that he's been tinkering with this, and I think he's enjoying his time with no-code tools. Also, there's we're in a month or so, we'll do an event only on no-code tools and what they mean for the industry. It's a really interesting field. So yeah, in terms of shipping stuff, you have the other bullet points over there. Build small projects, experiment as much as you can with them, measure the outputs, learn from it, and document your decisions, document your artifacts, document your strategies, document your analysis, document your cohorts of users, and all that is stuff that you're putting under your belt and is real experience. So that is, if I guess that if you could only do one thing of all the things that you could do to showcase that you can become a product owner, I would say like definitely ship stuff for real and put that in the hands of real users for real. In terms of CV and LinkedIn, right, to also be discoverable in a more proximate way, like people are starting to see that they like you and you have a product managers that are interested in hiring you, or recruiters. Your CV and your LinkedIn needs to exude the characteristics of a good PM. Like it needs to look clean, it needs to look good in terms of design as well, and it needs to be succinct, and it needs to be to the point, because that's what good PMs are. So yeah, clean design and to the point. And if I'm not going to cover much more about LinkedIn because we have an event on Friday specifically dedicated on how to optimize your LinkedIn. Actually, the person who's coming is a person who did AI research before and has been product manager in AI and looks at your LinkedIn page as a product. So how do you optimize your LinkedIn profile? I think that's interesting. So I will not repeat myself. You can come on Friday in the afternoon if this is interesting for you. And we can move to the next stuff, right? Which is how to overcome interviews, how to overcome case studies. And basically in the interview part, you might have two kinds of interlocutors, conversational partners. You might have people in HR, but you might have people from products, like people from HR. Depending on their level, they might know a lot about product and they might ask you really, really insightful questions, or they might be just doing a screening interview, going through a checklist of questions just to check basic knowledge, skills, and abilities. It depends on the skills of and the depth of the HR person behind you. And then you might have interviews with product people of different ranges, right? But in terms of the questions that you can expect, I try to group it in four categories. The first one is what I like to call McKinsey-like questions. And these are questions like this, like how many piano players are there in Singapore, right? It's like, let's just go through this scenario and you have to try to guess how many piano players are there in Singapore. How would you go about creating the logical chain of thoughts that let you come up with a guess, right? And how would you start creating different dimensions that would allow you to come up with a guess? Or imagine the city of Phoenix in the US. I'm not sure if Phoenix had a metro or an underground, but imagine that it has an underground. If it doesn't, imagine that it doesn't have one. So if it had one, how many lines would it have, and how many stops would it have, and where would these stops be, right? These kind of questions are called Fermi / back of the envelope analysis and Fermi estimations, and they help you reason about dimensions. They help you elaborate a thought process that is supposed to be sound, and it's supposed to correlate with your ability to think strategically, to think in systems, and to break down stuff. And the thing is, like, the validity of this kind of questions is debatable. Like it's been proven to work really well for certain roles in strategy, and for certain other roles it's not been predictive at all, but it continues to be a practice in many roles that are connected to product management. And the questions might not have anything to do with product management at all, like something like that, but people like these questions, and the interviewers themselves, the more the experiential feedback that they get from them is like they can really tap into the thought process of somebody and see if they like it or not. So which also counts when you want to choose for a tool or not. So you have things to learn more about this. I'm leaving some resources over here. Don't worry, like I'll share all the slides, but you can learn more about Fermi back of the envelope analysis over there. You can learn more about dimensional analysis, which is a branch of physics, but you can also apply it to other smaller problems or more down to earth or business kind of problems. And there's an amazing talk by this person about it from, I think the name is Peter Schultz.
Thank you for oversold. Thank you. Cool.
Oh, so yeah, Alex Schultz, we used to be leading growth and product at Facebook, and talks about the importance of dimensional analysis in the profession, so that you can learn a lot about that there, and also systems thinking, which is a different discipline that is more used to understand organizations, but it can be really helpful for this kind of questions. So the other type of question, the next category, is Google-like questions. And I have a sign of frustration over here because these kind of questions were made popular by Google at the beginning of Google. They wanted to tap into very radical thinking, so they thought that they could go into that direction with very radical questions. The problem with that is that Google realized that those questions were not effective. They changed their practice, but lots of organizations continue to replicate what Google did in the past, even though it's not it's not predictive at all, or it doesn't help you discern if you have a good product manager in front of you or not. But sometimes you might have to deal with questions like this. Like if you had a stack of pennies as tall as the Empire State Building, could you fit them all in one room? Or if you were a tiny dwarf that is stuck within a glass, how would you go about getting out? There's questions that are, they might throw you off, or they might get you completely off guard. And whatever you produce as an answer doesn't give the interviewer any more information about whether you're good or bad, or you're creative or not creative. But this got absolutely viral after this book. Are you smart enough to work at Google? And lots of questions that were connected or were used by Google at the time. And because of that, lots of recruiters have adopted it, but sadly, they don't give you any information. So if you want, check out the book, and maybe that helps you come up with answers that sound robust enough to pass to the next level. Hopefully that will not be the last step before you get into a product role, but just so you know that that might happen to you. By the way, no diss to Google whatsoever. They've changed their hiring practices by quite a bit, and this article is fantastic. They summarize how they go about it now, and this is already out from 2013, but this article is very good and has a very good roundup of how to hire a product manager and what are the kind of things that you might need. So yeah, like I think Google has moved on for sure, and they just iterated on something and learned, which is what you do. But other companies tried to replicate, and then they didn't catch up, and then we, the candidates, might end up suffering. So questions that you could definitely expect are company-specific questions. What do you like about our product? How would you go about improving our product? What are features that you like? What are features that you don't like? Like maybe you are given a scenario where you need to imagine a different audience. So imagine that you're, I don't know, you're Deliveroo, and you say that you're only now interested in targeting people who are below 16. So what would you change in our product? What features would you consider keeping of what we have? What would be new? What would you change? Maybe they just want to test your curiosity and your ingenuity, and they ask you like, what are the things that you think you don't understand well about our product, and if you got the role, what would you do to figure that out, right? To expand the problem space, or to be more certain about what the problem space is. So just a few samples over there. If you want to prep for this kind of questions, definitely use the product that you're interviewing for, use it to death, become a power user, see all the features, and try to get a very good experiential mental model of how that lands on you. Read the latest press releases on the product, try to look at the latest strategic decisions that they've made and why they've made them, and what are the things that they're trying to accomplish with such decisions. Make sure that if they have a product blog, make sure you read it, make sure that you collect their opinions on design, on how to manage products, on how to prioritize, on how to structure teams. That is going to give you a huge advantage, and I cannot believe that there's still today people that don't do this. Go into what other people are saying about the product, look at Google reviews, look at YouTube reviews, and look at the comments, look at what the reviewers are saying, and maybe get a feel for the competition, and how does the product of the company that you're applying for stand in the middle of the competitive space. And that can give you a very good grounding for the questions that you are likely to experience. And again, by the way, if I didn't say enough, make sure you use the product, really important. And in terms of knowledge, skills, and ability questions that you might have to pass, probably in the screening section or somewhere towards the middle of the project. These are more about knowledge that might link to business knowledge or product development knowledge or agile principles. So you might be asked, like, what is a user story? How do you write one? Within user stories, what are invest principles? What do they mean, and why are they important? You might get this kind of question, and if you don't know, then you immediately are put in a bucket like, oh, this person is not solid in any of its knowledge, even though it's a random question. But you need to prepare, right? So, or what methods do you know for roadmap prioritization? So a method that we use for prioritization back in my previous company was cost of delay, and which again for us was something like very commonsensical, where you would just look at the value of each feature and the value that they could bring, and every week that you postpone it in the roadmap is money that you're losing, right? So lots of people didn't know about this method and didn't even hear of it. So which for us was a little bit of a warning sign, because it was something very core to our practice. Or if you're in an agile environment and you need to think about user stories and how much time they're going to take, and you're closer to implementation, maybe you ask, well, what is estimation poker? Have you used it? Have you not used it? What is your experience? What are some of the advantages and disadvantages of it? So this is a better questions with better predictive value, and that tap on knowledge, skills, and abilities that you're going to be using on the road. Places where you can learn more about all this, if as you come out from Wagon and maybe you have good business background, and now you're closer to tech and the UX, but you don't know so much about the practices on how you create artifacts and how do you actually manage the work. All of these are excellent places. Like the AHA guides are very, very good. Like it's a very solid foundation for product management. The SVPG, the Silicon Valley product group, is considered the cutting edge of the product management thinking. So following their blogs and following their reflections gives you very good mental models and buckets to place information. Roman Pitchler has excellent stuff that it's very low level, like how do you go about managing a backlog? How do you go about managing a difficult part of the retrospective? How do you go about convincing a stakeholder of X? So there's always even a map between the blog post that he has and questions that you might find. So totally recommend it. And if you are very much into it and you are even willing to pay money, there's places like Product Manager HQ where you can hire a product manager that will prep you for this kind of interviews. So worth knowing if you're going for a role that it might be really, really big. Like you're getting a product management role at Google, and you're getting an interview, you're advancing the process. It's like, man, if I nail this, it's worth investing in it, or maybe not. It's really up to you. And this is more for Wagoners. So tools to get familiar with, because you might get asked on operations. You might need to know 1 or 2 tools about road mapping and backlog management. So we cover something very lightweight in Wagon, which is Trello, but you can learn more about GitHub project management, or look into Jira and maybe do a couple of trainings or play with the tool, which is considered the standard of enterprise software development. It has its good things and its bad things like anything else, but lots of people use it and you might be expected to know it. And then on design, you have tools on prototyping, which for instance, Figma, it's now very popular, so that's fine, and also works for wireframing. So I think you're safe on that end. On metrics though, understanding analytics, understanding tools like Google Analytics, which is now a staple of analytics, or Mixpanel, or any of these tools, really helps you to know what is the language, the categories, the kind of thinking that is prompted by these tools, and also maybe tools that map that measure site usage, like Hotjar. So maybe that's a little bit less popular. So let's just look it up very quickly. Which basically gives you a website heat map of how people are using the product, and where people click, and where people's attention is when your users are on your website or on your app. And finally, in collaboration, things around Agile rituals and wikis can really, really be helpful. So Notion, for instance, is becoming more and more popular for keeping your wikis. You can also do that in Jira. And having tools like, I don't know, Monday.com or Asana or any of this that is already prepared for Agile environments and managing iterations and all this can really be helpful when you want to know more about how they manage their thing, or they ask you questions like, have you ever worked with Jira? What do you do when you get a ticket in Jira and you get this and this scenario? Or how do you integrate tests with Jira all the way to the code, right? Which is possible. So that kind of stuff can give you a good edge, especially if you go into enterprise environments. Like I think in startups or smaller companies, you are more lenient with that. And my final category of questions on the interviews, it's behavioral questions. So these are probably the best quality of questions, and they're more predictive because they tap in your experience. So they will give you, like, give me an example when it was difficult to prioritize a feature and you had people from sales telling you this and you have somebody from marketing telling you this. How did you go about managing that situation? What did you tell people? What was the narrative? What was the story? What was your line of argumentation? Or did you ever have a conflict between business and engineering? And how did you go about solving it, right? Which is likely, right? That maybe you don't need to solve it yourself. There's other people who will also be involved in trying to solve it, but you also need to solve it as the product owner and make sure, the product manager, and make sure that there's enough cohesion in the team. So you might get those kind of questions. Make sure that you're prepared, right? How to prepare these kind of examples. I actually did this from selection science, and lots of recruiters use this frameworks, either or not. So Jonathan, maybe you know this, maybe you don't, or you know this in any other form or other acronyms. For when you ask behavioral questions, start giving context, start giving input about the situation, what product were you working in, what was the context, what were the people, what was the moment in the business environment, what was the task, what was the thing that you were trying to accomplish, what was your goal, and what did you actually do, even if it was a collaborative effort, what were your action, what was your contribution, what was the result of all that, and finally, what did you learn? So I'm just leaving this slide over here if you want to prepare for behavioral questions, or you know that behavioral questions are coming. This can help you ad-lib or create a template to prepare some examples that can be helpful for you. And finally, case studies. If you make it to the case studies, you're in a really good shape. That means that you're probably shortlisted and just competing against a very small amount of candidates at this point. I've written a bunch of case studies myself. I've done a fair bunch of them myself. So I categorize this in a few ways. Like my first category is broad macro style case studies, which could be either traditional or a role play. By traditional, imagine this MBA type of case study where you're just giving 50 pages with the history of the product, the current state of the product, lots of usage metrics, lots of finance metrics, lots of information from engineering, lots of inputs from UX, just a lot of information. They give you an hour and a half. Please give us your recommendations. What sense did you make out of the case study? And what do you think what do you think are the priorities? What would you do with it if you were a product manager? And the other one could be a role play, which is very used in agency. So maybe you're more of a product strategist, or you're just somebody in a consulting conversation, and you need to understand requirements, or you need to understand more about a need or understand more about a problem. And you need to create artifacts on the go, whiteboard, and stuff like that. This can be, depending on the agency and how tough your interviewers, it can be super fun or can be really, really stressful. So depends on the flavor of interviewers that you get. And the next one is what I call micro case studies. So it could be something like ship a feature. So imagine that you get a little bit of a briefing about what the product is, and they tell you, well, we need to implement a new email system, or we need to create feature X. Like I remember I applied for a position for the data product that is basically gives you HR metrics, and they gave me, like, we want to be able to compare candidates based on their profiles and the scarcity of their skills. That's the feature. So can you create high-level mockups? Can you create different features and then break those down in epics and then stories? And can you then can you then give me an idea of how is that going to impact engineering, and what are your thoughts about that? They might give you something even more micro, like grooming a backlog. So you're giving a backlog of a product, and please groom it, go through the stories and try to refine them. What do you like about the stories? What did you like? How would you prioritize them based on what you know about the product and the current state? or fix product issues. Like you're given 10 screens of a product, or you're given 2 user journeys, you're giving a bunch of issues. How would you fix them, and how would that translate into features? So all that, it's more like micro cases. And other things, other categories, like you might be asked a personal case walkthrough. I like this test a lot. So basically you are invited in front of a panel, and you have to tell them about a product that you implemented, or an epic that you implemented. But during that walkthrough, you're going to be receiving questions where there might be situational, and they ask you, well, why did you make that decision? If you would have not made that decision, what would you have done? How would you prioritize this differently if I change this assumption? So it's a mix between a broad macro style case study and your personal experience. And it's really fun to play with. Again, if your interviewers are not into putting you under pressure, it can be really fun. So that on case studies. Any questions, guys, on all this? Because I'm close to the end. Guidelines regarding case studies, like no matter what you do, make sure that your case study deliverables are clean, that they convey impact, that you're communicating clearly. There's this really cool article from No PM. That's a company that dedicates themselves to PM training. Article, product management, getting through the product management hiring process. And they have some input that I like, some input that I don't know if I agree, but this is really good. Like they basically let you know, like, how should you present a case study? What are clean slides? How do you communicate clearly? And that's really, really important. Like if your CV or your case studies or your material looks like this is not what you want from a product manager. You want something like really clear, that creates alignment, that can be understood broadly the same way in very little time by multiple stakeholders, right? So I found this really, really good. If you need to prep on case studies, best way is just to synthesize information or learn from other people. I think this resource is amazing. So this is two people, of course, half psychologists, half product people like me, and they have all these case studies on things that on stories of big companies and how they've done different strategies with UX and with different features to have a lot of business impact and mostly growth. They have psychology rules on UX, but basically you can go here and they have these really nice interactive walkthroughs of how a case study works. So, sorry, of how an application works, and that's how they portray the case study. So how Tinder converts singles into less than 15 minutes. And they basically walk you through the app, and you have this little guy over here letting you know what's their UX, how do they feel at the moment as they walk through the features. And it's really, really well done. Totally recommend it. So that's growth design. If you want to see how an absolute pro communicates, check out Sarah Tabo. Like, this person used to manage product at Pinterest, and the podcast and all her material is amazing. If you want to look what a good presentation looks like in PM terms, for instance, this article about the hierarchy of engagement and how to keep users engaged, it's really, really good. So make sure you check it out. I think this is a person that it's really worth learning from. The SaaStr podcasts on products are fantastic, and they're usually very short, very focused about concrete topics and dilemmas of product management. So absolutely recommend it. And the Intercom blog as well is fantastic. So good resources to read, to keep it more as a habit. So whenever you come into a case study or whenever your skills are put at the test, you have lots of information and mental models to tap onto. Yeah, and with that being said, guys, that's all I wanted to say for today. Thank you very much. I hope you liked it. For me, the next step for Levagoners and people in the community is like, hey, try to absorb all these things that I've said, try to find a starting point and come up with a little action plan. Like, I'm going to work on my portfolio. I'm going to work on this thing. I'm going to start writing more. I'm going to clean my CV. I'm going to clean my LinkedIn. You name it, right? And if in that process we can help you out, I'm very happy to do that. And now let's open it up for questions, right? Let's open it up for questions. By the way, we're a small crowd, so if you want to put your questions in through the mic, that's fine too. I have a few questions Still is asking. Is it important for a product manager to have some coding data knowledge? I'm a product designer and I realize many of my thought processes are very similar to my fellow PMs, which got me interested in this industry. Any advice for designers who want to try for a switch to product management? I think it's going to depend on the product and the size of the team. Like if you have a huge team of huge product team, it might be that you don't need any coding data knowledge, like hands-on coding data knowledge at all, because other people are handling that for you and you just need to be able to think in those terms. If you're in a smaller team, as a product manager, you might be writing test cases in Gherkin language, or you need to be very knowledgeable of your data infrastructure if you're managing huge amounts of data and what that means when you want to implement a new feature, and can really be an advantage. So I guess it depends. My advice that would be like, if you're looking to join a team or you want to be closer to developers, or you're looking for a job that it's in a very technical realm, it might help you to have some coding data knowledge, or at least some good technical knowledge. Dale is asking, there are many frameworks out there for PMs. How do you keep yourself updated and know when to use which framework? What do you mean by a framework? Like a framework to model growth, a framework to model engagement, a framework to model acquisition, a framework to model usage, a framework to model growth, a framework to model what? Like there's really so much. For acquisition, there's many, right? Like for instance, this one actually is that I was talking about from Sarah Tabel. She has this pyramid of engagement, which is really interesting. It's a good way of thinking about growth and how engagement eventually drives acquisition and retention. So this one is really nice. One of the most famous ones is the AR framework. Probably you've heard about this one. This one has been the hottest thing in Silicon Valley for so much time. Dave McClure's Pirate metrics, so going from acquisition, activation, retention, referral, revenue. There's these guys who I really like, from Leading Analytics, and this book, rather than giving you a framework to think about growth, it gives you a framework so you can design a framework to model growth for your product. And it's really good. This guy, Alistair Kroll, has been covering startups and working in startups and being an investor for I don't know how many years. And then he condensed all his knowledge in this book, and it's really good. So totally recommend it. And if you're asking prioritization, cost of delay. Like there's many ways of prioritizing, like two by two matrices and whatnot, but this is probably one of the most important frameworks that it's going to set you aside, because it's so important and there's so many people that don't know it. It basically helps you measure the costs of inaction. Fellow alumni, any questions? Just want to acknowledge a comment from Aaron. One thing that has helped me with interviews in the past is to research specific people who interview you. Find some commonalities with them and use it to your advantage. That's a great advice. Yeah. If you can build rapport with them, it's amazing. What's that? Don't talk too much. Like Rachel is saying, don't talk too much, otherwise they notice that. Yeah. Don't hack their accounts. Thanks, Michelle. Anybody else? Something to say, something to add, something to complain about? This was crap, Miguel. I didn't like it. I just didn't like it. I expected something else. That's fine too. No problem. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Perfect. If you are an alumni, you had no problem accessing the slides. But if you're from outside, if you left your email in Eventbrite, we'll send it over to you. Good. And with that, peace to everyone. Good luck on your PM search. If you need anything, shout out. We're here to help you out. See you. Have a great evening.